The late afternoon light stretched gently across the school parking lot, soft and golden, as if trying to calm the quiet tension that lived in Darlene's chest. She stood near the entrance, arms folded, watching a familiar car ease into a parking space. "Oh, David just parked," she said, her voice calm but edged with something unspoken. Beside her, Mrs. Reynolds adjusted her glasses and smiled politely. "You sound surprised." Darlene let out a small breath. "I do not think I have ever met Mark's dad at one of these meetings." "That happens more often than you might think," the teacher replied. "We have been separated for years," Darlene continued. "He has never been to a parent-teacher conference before." There was a pause. "He was working overseas," she added. "Oh," said Mrs. Reynolds. "Not for money." That earned a second look. Darlene gave a faint smile. "He is a good dad. Just not a great one. Otherwise he would have been on time." She shook her head quickly. "I am kidding. That is just how we talk. You know when he is not around." At that moment, David stepped out of the car, slightly rushed, followed by a woman who seemed to carry an entirely different kind of energy. Light, open, almost glowing with ease. "Oh, so sorry we are late," David said. Darlene looked at him, then at the woman. "Who is this?" "This is my girlfriend." "Blue," David said. Blue stepped forward, smiling warmly. "It is so nice to meet you. I have heard so much about you." Darlene shook her hand, her expression polite but careful. "Nice to meet you too." "This is unexpected." David cleared his throat. "I should have mentioned she was coming. We thought it might be good for her to be part of Mark's life more fully." Blue nodded. "I have only met Mark twice, but I feel connected to him already. Children benefit from having more people who care about them." Darlene raised an eyebrow. "Who says that?" Blue blinked, then smiled. "Maybe no one. But it feels true." Mrs. Reynolds stepped in with practiced ease. "Why do we not begin? Mark is doing very well." They sat, and as the conversation unfolded, a picture of Mark emerged. Bright, expressive, endlessly curious. "He is a pleasure to have in class," Mrs. Reynolds said. "Though he can be a bit talkative." "That is definitely him," Darlene said. "He has always had a lot to say." "It is not a problem," the teacher added. "If anything, he needs more challenge." David leaned forward. "We can help with that. Maybe this weekend when the kids stay over." Darlene turned slowly. "The kids are staying over?" David hesitated. "You said they could sometimes." "That is something people say," she replied. "It does not mean this weekend." "I am trying to make up for lost time," he said quietly. The words landed heavier than expected. Darlene sighed. "Fine. They can stay over." Blue smiled brightly. "You do not have to worry. I grew up in a shared community. We all helped raise the children." Darlene gave a dry look. "That sounds complicated." "It was beautiful," Blue said. "It was probably easier when no one knew whose kid was whose," Darlene muttered. The meeting ended, but the tension followed them out. Life did not slow down after that. It never did. At home, conversations overlapped. Becky argued about work, determined to prove herself. Darlene wrestled quietly with her emotions. Harris moved through everything with sharp humor and guarded independence. "Do not text me every 5 minutes when I am with Dad," Harris said one evening. "I will not," Darlene replied. Then, softer. "Just remember if you start liking her. It might hurt me." Harris smirked. "Are you jealous because she is pretty?" Darlene blinked, then laughed. "That was harsh. I am impressed." Days passed. David tried, in his imperfect way, to be present. Blue tried, in her open way, to belong. Darlene tried, in her steady way, to hold everything together. Then one evening, David stood at her door again. "Something happened," he said. Her stomach tightened. "What is it?" "Harris had a friend over," he said carefully. "They made a choice." Silence. You were supposed to be watching them, Darlene said. I know, he replied. I made a mistake. Later, when Darlene sat with Harris, the conversation was not loud, but it was real. Are you okay? She asked. Yes, Harris said. A pause. I am not a child, Harris added. But I still need you. Darlene nodded slowly. Then come to me. Always. That night, the house was quiet. David and Darlene sat together one last time. Not as a couple, but as something more complicated and more honest. It is time, she said. We should make it official. He nodded. It makes sense. It will be strange, he admitted. It already is, she said. They sat in silence. Not broken. Not bitter. Just changed. Upstairs, their children slept, growing into lives that would be their own. Somewhere ahead, new relationships waited. Uncertain. Hopeful. And in that quiet moment, both of them understood something simple. Love does not disappear. It changes. It softens. It finds new shapes. And sometimes, that is enough. The late afternoon light rested gently on the windows of the small school building, turning the glass into a soft mirror of the world outside. Inside, the air carried a faint mix of chalk dust and polished wood. The quiet hum of a place where small lives were slowly becoming larger ones. Darlene sat in a child-sized chair that did not quite fit her anymore, her posture halfway between patience and tension. She crossed her arms, uncrossed them, then folded her hands together, as if unsure which version of herself she needed to be in this moment. Oh, David just parked, she said, glancing toward the door. You know, I do not think I have ever met Mark's dad in this setting. Mrs. Reynolds, who had perfected the calm smile of someone who had seen every kind of parent imaginable, nodded gently. That happens more often than you would think. Well, we have been separated for years, Darlene continued. So he has never been to a parent-teacher conference before. There was a pause. He was working overseas. Another pause. Not for money. Mrs. Reynolds tilted her head slightly, as if unsure how to respond. But Darlene waved it off. But he is a good dad, she added quickly. Not a great dad. Or he would have been on time. She caught herself and laughed lightly. I am kidding. That is just how we talk. You know when he is not around. The door opened in a rush of movement and apology. Oh, so sorry we are late, David said, stepping in with a breathless energy that seemed to follow him everywhere. Behind him stood a woman with calm eyes and a presence that felt both grounded and floating at the same time. And this is? Mrs. Reynolds asked. This is my girlfriend. Blue, David said. Blue stepped forward with a soft smile. Thank you for having me. Member of the noblest profession. Mrs. Reynolds blinked, then smiled politely. And it is so nice to finally meet you. Darlene, Blue added. Darlene gave a polite nod, though her eyes held questions she had not yet decided to ask. Nice to meet you too. And what a surprise. David shifted slightly. I should have told you she was coming. It just felt like if she was here, she could be a more meaningful part of Mark's life. I have only met Mark twice, Blue said warmly. But I feel like I have known him forever. Darlene raised an eyebrow. That is impressive. And you know, Blue continued, the more parents, the better. Who says that? Darlene asked. No one says that, she answered herself. Mrs. Reynolds cleared her throat gently. Why do we not begin? And so they did. They spoke about Mark, about his quick mind and even quicker words, about how he filled silence before it could exist. He is an absolute pleasure, Mrs. Reynolds said, although he can be a bit talkative. That is so Mark, Darlene said with a small smile. He is highly verbal, Blue added. Darlene turned to her. You would know. The conversation moved forward, weaving between pride and concern, humor and responsibility, until it reached a small turning point. Well, Darlene said casually, if he needs more challenge. Maybe he can work on extra assignments this weekend, especially since the kids are staying over. David blinked. They are staying over? I never agreed to that, Darlene said. You said they could sometimes, David replied. That is something people say. It does not mean it is real. I am trying to make up for lost time, he said quietly. There was a moment. Then Darlene sighed. Fine. They can stay over. Blue smiled. Do not worry. I lived in a community where we all raised children together. Darlene let out a short laugh. That must have been convenient. Especially when no one knew whose kid was whose. The tension broke. Just a little. Elsewhere, life moved in its own imperfect rhythm. Dan stood in the dim light of early morning, rubbing his lower back as if trying to negotiate with it. Turns out, he said, if you do not eat right and exercise for 50 years, it catches up to you. Never too late, someone replied. That is what they say, Dan muttered. But it is. Becky leaned against the doorway, watching him. What do you need? She asked. Willpower or a beer? Dan looked at her. Once again, we have a winner. Life, in this family, was always a balance between struggle and laughter. Becky wanted more. More money. More independence. More proof that she could stand on her own. I want to work with you, she told Dan. It is construction, he said. Rough environment. I can handle it. He studied her. Women built the pyramids, she added. I do not know if that is true, he said. But I like the confidence. And just like that, she had her chance. At the same time, Darlene was navigating a different kind of construction. Not of walls and drywall, but of boundaries, trust, and the fragile architecture of family. When she found out what had happened with Harris, the world did not collapse. But it shifted. What do you mean they had sex? She asked. Her voice tight, but controlled. David looked like a man trying to hold too many things at once. I was at work, he said. I should have been there. I know. And Blue knew. Blue stepped forward calmly. We talked about it beforehand. About responsibility. About understanding your body. Darlene stared at her. You knew before it happened? The air grew heavy. For a moment, anger flared. Then something else followed. Not acceptance. Not yet. But a deeper realization. This was not just about control anymore. It was about trust. Later, in the quiet space between mother and daughter, the conversation softened. Are you okay? Darlene asked. Harris nodded. Yes. You could have come to me. I know, Harris said. But I needed to come to you when I was ready. That landed. Darlene took a breath. Then come to me now, she said. And Harris did. They spoke about fear. About responsibility. About mistakes and learning and the strange, confusing process of growing up. They spoke honestly. And in that honesty, something stronger than control began to form. Connection. Meanwhile, life kept moving. Becky struggled with her own battles, quietly admitting what she had avoided for too long. I do not think I can go a whole day without drinking, she said. Dan did not judge. He listened. Then we start with half a day, he said. And we build from there. Simple. Practical. Possible. And in that moment, hope did not come as a grand gesture. It came as a plan. Back at the house, as night settled in, Darlene and David stood in a space that had once been simple and was now complicated. We need to talk, she said. I know. They spoke about mistakes. About boundaries. About what came next. And then, quietly, almost gently, she said it. I think it is time we get a divorce. David nodded. Yeah, he said. It makes sense. There was no explosion. No dramatic ending. Just two people recognizing that something had changed. It will be weird, he said. It already is, she replied. They both smiled. Just a little. Because even in endings, there can be something honest. Something kind. Something that leaves room for new beginnings. And maybe that was the point. Not perfection. Not control. But growth. Messy. Imperfect. Human growth. The kind that happens slowly. The kind that stays. The kind that turns ordinary lives into stories worth telling.